the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such idiots in all my life.
I said, listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such idiots in all my life.
I said, listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with Buddy.
But the
Oh, that's weird. It should be showing. Hello, and welcome to Technical Difficulties with the Badgers. Let me get the chat up in the window here. For some reason, it is like it was showing before. Oh, I hit the little eyeball thingy. That's why. Now it's showing. Okay. Ta-da! Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 290. Do floods claims about MRAs and DV hold water? HBR Talk 290 is going to be fun because we have a shitload of information. Starting with to debunk his claim about MRA's claims, but we'll go there in a minute. I'm your host Hannah Wallen here with
Michael Flood's claims can't even hold my beer.
Oh my god, that's great. Well, and honestly, like, dude, If you're gonna argue with us, at least argue with us. Don't argue with the MRAs in your head. It makes you look bad.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This is gonna be a fun night. I'm already in the mood, guys. Allison had a Twitter thread that I jumped into, and I was in a Twitter thread 2 nights ago, and I paused it. The people in the thread are not happy with me. Well, on the other side are not happy with me for this, but so I had 2 threads of liars and false framers, which are liars with extra steps, and we're going to be, talking about a liar and false framer tonight. So this should be great. I'm already.
He's a professional.
Yeah, a professional liar.
He's got a PhD in it.
That's a pissy hoe degree. Just for the for the layman who doesn't understand university speak. PhD in when we're talking, social sciences, feminism especially, is a pissy hoe degree. So there you go. But I'm here tonight with Lauren Brooks, the nonsense annihilator, and with Mike Stevenson, the personification of perceptivity. And tonight we're going to fact check our self-proclaimed fact checker again. But before we do that, we gotta do what we gotta do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice, or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, where we piss everybody off and say things that might get us banned. Which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And I believe from there you can also find your way to our Discord. I may be wrong about that one, but I'm pretty sure there is also a link to the page that lets you into the free part of our Discord. So, if not, then let us know, because that should be there. So, here we go, guys. Let's look at this page, which is half trapped behind OBS. I need a bigger computer screen again. Michael Flood claims that the men's rights position on domestic violence is that men are victimized by domestic violence 33% more often than women. Anybody see a problem with that? That's the MRA position.
Right.
Nothing about all the discussion that we've had about how when men are victims of violence, they have little to no recourse against their perpetrators. Nothing about the importance of being able to get men out of violent environments, because when they get into a position where they can no longer refrain from defending themselves, their defensive violence may be out of control and create even more tragedy. Nothing about the fact that men's lives can be in danger. Just as much danger to the individual man as any woman can be, depending on the intentions and behaviors of his perpetrator, right? Nothing about lesbian violence and how that reflects on differences in behavior. Nothing about the fact that we have advocated repeatedly, very vocally, to just expand the taboo that men face. Don't hit girls, don't hit women, to both sexes. Don't hit each other. Women shouldn't hit men because it's hitting a person who's not allowed to defend themselves, right? It's just as bad to hit someone who's not allowed to defend himself as to hit someone who is weaker than you and less capable of defending themselves. Like, men are also admonished. It's less often talked about that we teach big, strong guys to not pick on guys who are smaller than them, right? And we teach big, strong guys that it's their job to protect the people around them. I know, because I come from a family with a lot of big, strong guys. The men in my family, many of them are over 6 feet tall, big boned. When I say big boned, I mean like when they're in their prime, their wrist bones, some of them are as big as my knees when I was in my prime. And so we're talking men who people looked at them and treated them like they were intimidating, even when they had done nothing to intimidate anybody, just their very presence. And so they get treated as though their appearance is an act of violence from the beginning, as though their appearance is an act of deliberate intimidation, right? We talk about stuff like that. We may have some people within the movement who have cited a study and made a claim about the difference in frequency of reported violence. But it's not the study that he's talking about. He's talking about a study that's based on a survey of staff and students here. So let's go ahead and take a look at what he actually wrote here. So are you guys able to see my window, even though it says it's running? It's black with lettering over it in my window. So
Yeah, I can see it.
okay, I just want to make sure, because like I keep going back and forth between Discord and what I'm actually looking at, because Discord makes it look like it's paused, which is annoying. So it says here, violence and gender. Men's rights advocates, MRAs, like to cherry-pick findings that show or seem to show that domestic violence against men is more common than DV against women. The latest example comes from a multi-country study of university staff's experience with violence. So he's admitting in the first paragraph that this is not the claim, but this is the only claim he's addressing. So I don't know, maybe we should take his concession on everything else. This is his concession on everything else.
40% is the statistic I've often heard, that men experience something like 40%, and you have to take some of that with a pinch of salt, because you don't know what gets reported and what doesn't. But one wouldn't wish to report on unreported things because they're unreported.
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. Let's discuss the tendency to report being victimized, right? If I was out in public with my husband and people saw me look angry and then turn around and slap him, a lot of people would be like, "Oh, what did he do wrong?" Right? They wouldn't care. They wouldn't call anybody. Nobody would say anything to me, unless, you know, maybe some women might say, "Hey, that's not how you handle being angry." But most people don't approach me when I'm angry. And I think a lot of it is because women get away with that kind of stuff. But also, you know, a lot of people have resting bitch face. I have resting psycho killer face, and I think that's a bit of a deterrent. So, and it's worse now because I've got a front tooth that's broken. This is gonna sound painful. I can assure you guys, the nerves are dead, and it's genetic. I have 2 mutations on the motherfucker gene. I think I talked about this before. So I look like a scary not toothless, but broken-toothed old witch right now, till I get my teeth fixed, which I'm not going to do till I'm prepared to take time off from everything to deal with having all the teeth in my upper jaw pulled out, right? So people wouldn't approach me for a lot of reasons. Now, if I was a man, even if I was a big man, and I looked Hulk scary or crazy man scary, crazy, I don't know, warlock man scary, there would still be guys who felt obligated, even if they thought they were going to lose the fight. Even if they thought they were going to get their asses kicked. There would definitely be people calling the cops. Do I see pics or it didn't? Oh, God. You guys do not want to see this. It will hurt to look at it. Anyway. But the point being, so already we see a difference. So externally, nobody is going to report or confront if I slap him. He will definitely be reported and confronted if he slaps me. Also, he would probably break my neck if he did it on purpose. Well, or if he was out of control. He's very strong. But in any case, the other thing about it is he would be unlikely to say anything. Whereas if I didn't die, I would be scared to death. If my husband wasn't the gentle and kind person that I look up to and try to emulate and have settled down a lot because of, and he was violent like that, I'd be terrified. You bet I would report. You bet I would run. It would be a much more exaggerated thing. And the really bad thing is if the sizes were reversed, right? If it was Jack Sprat and his wife, and he slapped her, people would still treat it the same as they would treat the situation if it was my husband and me.
I don't know who Jack Sprat is.
Jack Sprat could eat no fat. His wife could eat no lean. And so betwixt the both of them, they licked the platter clean. The Jack Sprat and his wife, Jack Sprat is always portrayed as like this incredibly thin, gaunt guy, because everybody always thinks that eating fat makes you fat. And his wife is this big, hulking, overbearing ballbuster of a woman, right? So, yeah, if it was actually a little guy and a big, hulking ballbuster of a woman and he slapped her, people would still treat it like, oh, that guy's abusing that poor innocent woman. He's going to hurt her. We have to do something. He would still be
some people might assume that Jack Sprat's wife was some kind of Gorlock thing going on, and it's actually a man.
Today,
it could be a trans woman and a trans man. You don't know anymore.
I know. That's what you get for marrying a trans woman. Like they're uniquely violent or something. They're not.
I mean, either way, someone would be on the phone to the cops, and the cops are going to show up, and that's where it really matters is, who's going to get taken away in handcuffs.
Yep.
And in certain states, the laws don't treat men as equally as they do women.
So
if they show up and the man says that, he's been assaulted by the woman, in some places it's they'll either take both of them away, or the guy won't be leaving. He'll be the one that's dragged off to jail.
Yep.
And then to have to prove his point later by hiring lawyers.
Yeah. Right.
It's a mess.
Night motorcyclist. Somebody brought up Ronda Rousey, and night motorcyclist said she's overrated. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't want to get into a fight with her.
No.
I think she's younger than me. And then of course, obviously, she works out a lot more than I do and is trained. So it would still suck for me. And I think a lot of men and like general guys that are just the guy that works at the convenience store down the street, the guy that's driving an Uber, guys that are not they're not the ones handling the heavy lifting on a construction site and everything. Guys that work in chemical labs and spend their whole day testing things and writing things down. I don't think they would want to get into a fight with her either.
According to a certain report, there's an alarming amount of men, apparently especially American men, who think they could beat a tiger or a lion or a grizzly bear in a fist fight. Or an elephant.
Well, in a fight, yeah. So
Men can hideously overestimate their strength sometimes.
I think a lot of it is they overestimate their speed and whether they'd be able to quickly outsmart the animal. But because I've had that mental game that you play with yourself, right? What would happen? What would I do if XYZ happened? You know, what would I do if some people came onto this bus that I'm on with guns and took the bus hostage, hijacked it and everything? What would I do? You know, people have that kind of what would I do in this scenario, so they think about that with animals. And I've always thought, well, obviously I would grab something long and sharp and shove it down the animal's throat, except can you guarantee that something like that's going to be handy? You know, the real answer is you run, like, and pray. and if you come across something that you might be able to use to stop the animal from being able to close its jaws on your poor pink human flesh, you know, blood-filled, totally soft, unprotected, and wimpy by comparison, covered in skin that's much less hard and thick than an animal's skin, human flesh, well, then you do that.
I have to wonder how much of those statistics came down to if it was specifically a fist fight, because that means Marcus Queensberry rules. You can't use claws, you can't use teeth. So if it was just fists, then I don't know. Maybe you could beat a medium-sized big cat. But that's
rely on the claws and teeth. Like, you can't.
Yeah, and women have claws and teeth as well, by the way, and they use them.
Yeah, and the one other thing that women and cats have in common is if you actually said Marcus of Queensberry rules, they would completely ignore that and fight however the fuck they wanted. Having been in a few fights with some people that I weren't sure whether they were women or cats.
Oh yeah, no, everything comes out. The nails, the claws, you rip the hair out. Like it's everything's fair game. Like
oh my god, the first time I got into a fight with somebody who used a weave, I was just like, you know, they pull hair, and you try to get a hold of the fingertips to get them out of the hair, and eventually you resort to grabbing their hair and pulling. And there's an interesting discovery. Some people, and it's not all users of fake hair, but some users of fake hair can be completely disabled by having it exposed that their hair is fake.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the fight stops. They're not injured.
That's like getting in a swimming pool. Okay, when you got a weave, you ain't getting in a swimming pool. You can't fuck up that hair. It's the level of vanity that women will, you know, that line that women will not cross, you know?
Well, and the girls that I grew up with, like, when we would get into fights, you're talking, you know, fists balled up, elbows out a little bit, feet spread just right to keep your balance, and none of this, I'm going to grab something and hold on. It's, I'm going to jack your jaw. Your head's going to turn halfway around. You're going to be lucky if you can still stand up after I hit you, you know, that kind of thing. And of course, I was not a very big girl, so I ended up having to learn to do things like somebody throw a punch at me, I would pull, grab and pull, and knock them down and that kind of thing. This is just simply common sense in a fight. You're right. You want to stop the other person from hitting you. That's the whole goal of a fight. Stop the other person from continuing to hit you, unless you started the fight and then your goal is to hurt the other person. But I didn't start fights, physical fights. I just would get into them because people didn't like things I said.
You ended them. You didn't start them. You ended them.
Yeah, I did end them. It never. It's one of those things. Like, I never really felt good about it either way. But I also wasn't going to back down if I thought something was right. You know, if I said something and people were like, "You take that back, or I'm gonna kick your ass," I'm like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this again." Okay. You know, and,
Round 2.
like, really? Can we just talk about this? Come on. But no, and so in my neighborhood, by the time we were, I would say, what kids would call middle school age, 5th and 6th grade, none of the girls in my neighborhood felt it necessary to beat on each other over anything but boys. Right? If one of the girls thought one of the other girls was looking at her boyfriend, then there would be a fight. And the main thing, my response to all of that was to simply, like, if somebody accused me of that, I'd be like, why would I be looking at your boyfriend? You know, I'm not interested in your boyfriend. That's not who I like. You know, he's your boyfriend, for fuck's sake. You know, whatever. That'd be the end of that. And most of the time, that ended it. Just being conciliatory. No, I'm not doing that. I am sorry it looked that way. I'm not interested. But I'm not going to touch some other girl's boyfriend with a 10-foot pole because he's some other girl's boyfriend. Right? Very simple. And for the most part, that was that. And then you go out of town doing things like, I learned very quickly that I didn't like hanging out in bars because there was always some dumb bitch in there that would get a few drinks in her and then find out there were girls from my hometown in that bar. And I do not know how people always figure that out. We don't have a special accent. I don't think we have a special look. Maybe we did. But there would be some bullshit come up, and they would try to start a fight. Or we would be enjoying ourselves, dancing, and, you know, my friend would be drinking, and I would be the designated driver, and all of a sudden there's a fight breaking out on the floor, and people are getting thrown around, and we leave. And so I learned that was bull. But female violence, people get scared of it when it's happening. And then afterwards, they're like, well, it was just women. It's no big deal. Are you kidding me? That girl put the other girl through the wall. The drywall is broken there now. You know, it's just a couple of women.
Yeah, no, I'm not scared of it. I just don't want to fucking be around it.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to deal with it. You know what I mean? Because God forbid it comes in my direction and I have to then get involved. Oh, we all going down. Like, it's not gonna end pretty, you know. So that's why I just fucking stay home. I don't want to deal with people and their fucking excesses.
Right. So there's two groups of women. There's women who prefer to avoid all that shit, right? And there's women who wallow in it. And women who wallow in it are avoided by women who avoid it, obviously, because we don't want to get caught up in it. We don't want to get involved in it. We learned how to negotiate our way out of it when we were in elementary school, like boys, and that's the end of it. You know, and then there are guys that are the same way. There are guys that like to go out and get in bar fights, and then there are guys that like to test their strength against each other, and they do it for sport. That's a whole different category of violence. It's not. It's competitive violence, not adversarial, animosity-based violence,
right?
Or predatory.
Relational aggression, you might call it.
It's
aggression against someone who can't leave. I mean, women can leave and go to a shelter, but men generally they have nowhere to go, and unless they're lucky enough to still have friends after being married for a sufficient time.
Yeah. Yep. And in that situation, you know, when you look at female violence and the categories of female violence, how I would categorize female violence against men is like picking on someone in handcuffs. You see social handcuffs on him. You expect him to not hit you back because he's not allowed. You expect him to withstand the violence and to not be wounded by it, because you're taught that he's bigger, stronger, faster, and has more endurance than you are, and therefore he's better able to take it. And so, when women engage in violence against men, it is based on an attitude that ignores their humanity. It ignores their ability to not their ability, but their obligation, I should say, to pretend they can take it. Their obligation to not hit back. Their obligation to endure suffering because a woman is inflicting it and not another man. And it's, to me, that's more malicious than attacking someone in animosity because, you know, you're angry knowing that they could hit you back. Like when, when guys get into fights with each other about something, when they get angry with each other about something, and they actually get into a fight. And I've seen that in bars too, where, a couple of drunk guys get on each other about something. One of them does something the other one thinks is highly inappropriate, and where a bouncer has to throw a guy out because that guy is being disruptive. Whatever. People do stupid shit sometimes when they're people who can't control themselves when they're drinking. They do really stupid shit sometimes, and it's a completely different situation when it's guy on guy, because each one knows the other one can inflict damage. Each one knows the other one is not held back from by any kind of taboo from defending himself when attacked. And each one knows that if he injures the other one in the course of the fight, that it's going to be considered par for the course. You got in a fight, you got injured. That's what you should expect. Whereas when women do it to men, the woman goes into it with these false beliefs that she's invincible, that because he's not allowed to fight back, or that she's blameless because she's the woman and what she's doing can't be wrong. And those are things that we talk about. So this thing of him going into the numbers, more men than women. Well, you know what? When a guy is asleep on his couch in his living room, and his significant other brings in a teapot with boiling water and pours it on him, he doesn't care what percentage of guys have experienced violence from women.
Right.
He cares.
It doesn't matter.
Has experienced third-degree burns at the hands of his female SO.
Right.
Doesn't matter what other guys have experienced. It matters what's happening to him right now. But, so he says, let's see. MRAs claim that study shows that more men than women have experienced physical domestic violence. Alright, so now he's added the word physical, even though the claim he's citing just says men victimized by domestic violence 33% more often than women, says 15-country study, which I've never seen that claim made. So I don't know what MRAs he's talking to. Says, there are at least two problems. One, the study is not about domestic violence. The questions ask about violence by someone connected with the institution, other staff or students, not intimate partners. See the survey instrument here, example pages 33, 42, and so on.
This is the study that you chose.
Yeah.
This is your example.
Yeah.
What? Oh, good God.
Then he goes on and says, the study shows that women suffer more violence than men. Women suffer more violence overall, more psychological violence. He did say psychological violence. Okay.
Wow.
Economic violence. Feminism has really warped our language.
Seriously.
Sexual violence and sexual harassment. See table on page 33 in the full report here. So, I'm going to basically say fuck his study because I don't care about his claim about MRAs. So I'm going to switch here to the PASC study, the PASC page on the rates of bidirectional versus unidirectional intimate partner violence across Samples, Sexual Orientations, and Race/Ethnicities, a comprehensive review by Jennifer Langen Richardson Rolling and Company. Which, you can say that 5 times fast. It's a long title and a long author name. And one of the things that this study found, and it's kind of challenging to read because it, instead of saying out of 100%, it's going, or, well, I'll get there. So in the early paragraphs here, this is very small on my computer, but if I make it bigger, it's gonna be hard to read on the page. So, researchers have increasingly challenged the notion that of men's unilateral perpetration, right? It's talking about that. Such findings have led to gender symmetry versus asymmetry debate. Resolution of this debate has important prevention and intervention implications. So what she's basically explaining here is, if feminists are wrong about domestic violence being mostly male perpetrated as a means of mostly controlling women, and there's a lot of female perpetration, and the reason isn't what they're saying, then intervening in that violence and helping people to develop better ways of relating to each other so that there's no violence in the relationship is going to take a different pathway than they're using. So it's very important to get it right if you want to actually reduce domestic violence. Big if. Resolution of the debate. Let's see. In the current study, a comprehensive review of the literature was conducted, and 50 studies, 48 empirical studies, 1 meta-analysis, and 1 book chapter, that reported rates of bidirectional versus unidirectional violence were uncovered using a variety of search engines and key terms. So this basically, when he talks about the study that he's talking about one study at one university that has nothing to do with domestic violence. He admits this study has nothing to do with domestic violence. So there's that. So what we're looking at then, let's see, we're going to scroll down here to the next page. According to the results presented in the manuscript that corresponds with this online table, and that would be the table on the analysis, all studies included, were entered into an online summary table that includes the full reference for this study. The average weighted rate of IPV reported was 16.3%. So about 1 in 4 relationships, average, domestic violence. So 3 out of 4 relationships do not even have domestic violence. And that's from all those studies. I think 1 in 4 is still a lot, personally.
Yeah. I was gonna say, like, God damn.
This is another thing. Like, I talk about, what would happen if my husband and I were violent toward each other. Well, I could not. I just couldn't. But it's because I have better conflict management skill than that, and I love my husband. I really love my husband. I care a lot about him. I'm invested in his welfare. I like seeing him happy.
Yeah.
And if I hurt his feelings, that would devastate me.
That would break me. Oh my God.
Yeah. Like, he has to be gentle when he doesn't like something I've done, because I feel so bad if I screw up. And if I slip up and let my temper get the best of me in front of him, I'm so embarrassed. Like, I could let it happen in front of all you guys and I'd feel a little bad about it. But his opinion matters more than everyone else I know put together.
Yeah.
So it's a different way of relating to somebody, I think. And I think that part of what happens with domestic violence is that people grow up in environments where they don't learn to connect with someone on that level and value another person outside of themselves on that level.
Mm-hmm.
I have to wonder if this 1 in 4 relationships has domestic violence, if that includes all those bullshit feminist terms like psychological violence and economic violence. And
oh, I'm sure
sexual
it does.
violence
I'm sure
and all
it does.
That might begin to explain it, especially if many of them are bogus claims of economic violence, like you only earn 50 grand a year instead of $500,000.
Well, or you won't let me use the credit card. Well, the credit card is maxed out. Well, then pay it off. I don't have the money to pay it off. Oh, you're being economically violent. You're withholding money from me. No, you maxed out the credit card, and I don't have money to put on it right now. There is no money. Like that I've heard that conversation. I've actually heard that conversation, and well, you're being economically abusive. How? I'm not the one spending all our money. Like I've literally heard that conversation. Is there visual violence? Well, there is such a thing as audio violence, but then there's also what people might call audio violence. If you make sound loud enough, it can do physical damage. I suppose there's also ways to make light do physical damage, but I think it's easier to do with sound waves. And like,
if you smell bad enough, then that's nasal violence.
Well, if you smell bad enough, then some lady at the gas station I used to work at will be like, as soon as you leave the room, will be like, "What's the matter with that guy? Doesn't he respect women?" Because the rest of the people in the room can't smell him, just the women.
Yeah, exactly.
How dare he be homeless? But and smoke. Yeah, that's a whole other ballgame. So the actual data, getting back to the actual data here. So 16 out of that 16%. All right. Using weighted averages, those reporting IPV is intimate partner violence. So for the layman, you'll see in these studies, you'll see the term bidirectional and unidirectional to describe two-way violence and one-way violence. And then you might see mutual violence versus individual violence for the same description. You'll see, what was the other one? One-way and two-way, I think. You'll see IPV for intimate partner violence. You'll see DV for domestic violence. You'll see IP and SV for intimate partner and sexual violence. Then, let's see, FMPV is female on male partner violence, and MF PV is not motherfucking partner violence. It's male on female partner violence. So you're going to see a lot of this abbreviated and initialed and all that kind of stuff. So
just why the need for the fucking distinction? It's violence.
Yeah. And it's partly because of all of this, the claims that it's a male behavior. You have to actually single out female violence so that people can see it and highlight it, because if you don't, people don't acknowledge it.
Yeah.
But so 57.9% of the IPV reported was bidirectional, which is approximately 2/3.
Mm-hmm.
Approximately 2 out of 3 of the 1 in 4 relationships. So that's not very many relationships to begin with, but then only 1 out of 3 of the 1 in 4 relationships, a third of a fourth of the relationship population is one-way violence. So you understand. And 2/3 of 1/4 of the relationship population, the violence goes both ways. It doesn't say anything in this study about who initiates, but it does say that. Of the remaining 42.1%, and then now it's dividing that 42 into two numbers. So 13.8% of all IPV was male on female. Right? 28.3% of all IPV was female only on male. And you'll notice 28.3% is more than double 13.8%. It's about 70% of the total one-way IPV. And I did the math on this a while back to get to that conclusion. So that's just a description of how much one-way IPV is female perpetrated. Or in other words, more than 2/3 of intimate partner violence victims who don't use violence to fight back, who don't use violence to defend themselves, are men. Among the 2/3 of the ones that, over 2/3 of the ones that perpetrate against somebody who doesn't defend themselves with violence are female. 2/3 plus of perpetrators, against a defenseless person are female. I'm looking at the chat. Oh, I see. It's just one guy going, "We will see you later too, Senior Sticks. Hopefully you can come back and listen to the rest of this." But yeah. So what we're looking at here is when it goes two ways, or when it goes one way. I'm sorry. It's mostly female perpetrated. That should give you a clue about the two-way violence, right? How much of the two-way violence is probably defensive violence by guys? Feminists like to claim that most two-way violence is men assaulting their partners, and then their partners defending themselves. But I don't think that's the case, right? I mean, this doesn't sound like that's the case.
Well, especially, I mean, and feminists will say, well, who was the initiator in the bidirectional violent domestic violence situations? Who was the initiator? They'll always try to defend the women, but I mean, if you look at just alone the number of women who initiate, why wouldn't you also correlate that or say that or have the expectation that there would be a higher percentage of women who also initiate in the bidirectional violence?
Right. So if we stay,
here's something that really fucking disturbs me, because they love to say like emotional violence and economic violence and all these other different types of violence that gets perpetrated against women. Well, do they think that it can't happen to men as well? That women can't do that to men? And is that also not a form of violence? And why is it discounted when it happens to men, but highlighted when it happens to women? And
so for me, when I think of violence, I think of physical things, right? So it's hard for me to use the term emotional violence. I think the term abuse is sufficient, because abuse doesn't necessarily have to mean physical violence. It's abusive to bully someone verbally and emotionally too. It's abusive to cheat on someone. It's abusive to steal from someone. It's abusive to disrespect someone's personal property to the degree that you damage it or make it useless to them. And, create a situation where it's mistreated in a way, like if you have somebody's mom's wedding ring or whatever that they value it very much, and maybe you make a video shoving it up your nose. And you do it because they would be upset about it specifically, and not because it's funny. That'd be abuse, right? But it's not violence. And doing something ridiculous that would be funny in any other circumstance, but your purpose for doing it is because you know it's going to make the other person suffer. Like, that's abuse, even if it's not violence. So I hate it when people substitute the word violence for the word abuse. It messes up the language, it obfuscates, and it makes it easy for people to say, well, it's not the same when this group does it as it is when that group doesn't, because when we're saying violence, well, this group's bigger and stronger, and therefore all forms of violence are worse when they engage in them. But if you isolate someone from their friends and family, for instance, whether you do it by physically barring them from leaving the house, or by becoming the kind of person that they won't come around, by alienating them so much that your partner can't engage with them anymore and can't reach out to them anymore, it's still the same abuse. It's still abuse, even if one thing actually involves physical restraint and violence, and the other is being an asshole on purpose to create that result. So
you can be abusive without being violent. You can even be abusive without being aggressive. I was about to say aggressive is a good word to use instead of violence. But yeah, you can even be abusive without being aggressive. You can sort of smother someone to that. It's the devouring mother trope, and it can just as easily be the devouring spouse, I suppose. A lot of abusers don't know they're being abusive. They think they have the best of intentions, but they're just they're very possessive. And again, possessive isn't the same as aggressive. It's just a mode of interacting with someone that takes advantage of them in ways that you can do unconsciously. And yes, that's bidirectional as well, but it can get overlooked in one direction where it wouldn't get overlooked in another. Yeah.
And people might not even get it. And it's like, we all expect parents to do certain things for their kids, right? Well, the functional mother, let's say your life tools, equate them with a hammer, right? Your child needs a hammer for life, to solve his life problems. The hammer is going to nail every problem in existence, right? The functional mother helps the child make his own hammer when he's growing up, and make it a good, strong hammer that he is highly equipped to use and has great understanding of its function and its features, and is comfortable deciding when and how to use it. And then says, all right, if you need me, I'm here. And that's, as the child gets older, then and becomes an adult, the child can take that hammer out into life with him, and every time he's got a problem to nail, he's got that hammer. And if he needs mom, then he can call mom and ask questions. But mom doesn't interfere with his choice, because he's an adult then and he's got freedom. But the devouring mom makes a hammer in her own image for the kid. This is the hammer you're going to use. And then won't let go of it or the kid, and decides for the kid, this is the problem, we're going to hammer this is what we're going to nail, and so on, to the detriment of the kid's freedom, relationships, ability to make any decisions for himself, sense of self, and sense of confidence. And it doesn't feel like abuse to her when she's doing it. She's just trying to control for every possible thing that could go wrong, that could get in and hurt her baby. But she doesn't realize that she's the one making it so that when she's gone, he's never going to be able to figure out how to live his life. He's not going to have the connections with other people that he's going to need. He's not going to, understand anything about his own character, his skills, his strengths, his weaknesses, what he needs to protect, what he needs to emphasize, what tools he can use. Maybe he prefers a drill. Like maybe, and so on. So you have this situation where she basically kills his ability to become a fully functioning adult. And destroys it, and doesn't realize that that's abusive.
And something, I think that is not a new phenomenon. I think that's something that's definitely been accelerated. I don't think that's a brand new concept.
Oh no.
I think ever since mothers have been having children, they've been learning how to manipulate them and manipulate their situations around them.
Well, and women who have more time on their hands and less control maybe over their own impulses in their own lives are more likely to behave this way. Like the women that I've seen among my friends and family that have behaved this way toward, and it's more often toward sons. There's other types of abuse that are more often toward daughters. But that devouring mother behavior seems to, obviously it stems from insecurity, but it also seems to stem from the woman not having enough other things to occupy her, and the focus of her life becomes her son. Don't get me wrong, it's great to be the mother of a son and enjoy having a mother-son relationship and be proud of your son and all those great things that you have with parenting. But your son shouldn't be the focus of your life. He's got a whole life of his own to focus on. He doesn't have time to make mom the focus of his life. You're going to be an empty nester. And there are good things about that. There are some really good things about that. But yeah, there seems to be this, women don't have I don't know if they don't build a sense of their own individuality or whatever. But from the devouring moms that I've met, from among that group, I don't think I can pick out a single one that had a full-time job, for instance, ever. So, make out of that what you will. It's not a study, it's just an observation. It's not set in stone, and so on. But yeah, so abuse doesn't necessarily engage in violence. It can be as subtle as, are you sure that you want to go out with that girl again? I think she's probably got some kind of an STD. When you're talking about a girl that you know nothing about, and your reason is because you're afraid he really likes her, and he might not pay enough attention to you anymore. So let's see, going back to the other one that I wanted to talk about that Flood didn't address, that we talk about all the time, is differences in frequency of violence and reported injury between relationships with reciprocal and non-reciprocal intimate partner violence. That's the other word I was trying to think of, reciprocal and non-reciprocal. So reciprocal is obviously two people hitting each other. Non-reciprocal is when one person hits and the other person doesn't hit back. And there's a couple of spots in this. I'm just highlighting. We're not going to go over the whole study, any of these. This one was, there it is, 18,761 heterosexual relationships, 11,370 respondents. So some of these respondents talked about multiple relationships. This is U.S. adults aged 18 to 28, so the age of kids graduating from high school and going to college, graduating from college, getting jobs, being newlyweds, having kids, so up into marital age. And in this one, almost 24% had some violence. When I mentioned 16% before, that's not 1 in 4. That's like 1 in 6. Because 25% would be 1 in 4. My brain is not working tonight. I know Ken math tonight has the dumb. But About half were reciprocal in this study. So it was a different number of reciprocal violent cases in this study versus the other study. But interestingly, in non-reciprocally violent relationships, again, women were the perpetrators in more than 70% of cases. So in both studies that we just looked at, when we're talking about one person being violent and the other person not retaliating in any way, that was mostly female perpetrated. The other thing about this that stood out to me was reciprocity, meaning two-way violence, was associated with more frequent violence among women, but not men. So when it was two-way violence, women were violent more frequently, but men were not. And when it was one-way violence, women were violent more frequently, but men were not. So it indicates a higher level of perpetration among women. Feminists will look at this study and they'll highlight the fact that women are more likely to be injured. But the type of violence, reciprocal, that was associated with more frequent violence in women but not men, was the violence that was associated with greater injury. So you're looking at a situation where women are engaging in more frequent violence and then they're getting hurt. When we talk about domestic violence and we talk about how men and women get injured, feminists like to ignore all of the data on men's experience of injury, ignore all of the data on female perpetration, ignore all of the data on men's help-seeking experiences where they can't get the system to work with them if they are the victim of partner violence, and hone in on, well, when men are violent, they're more dangerous because they're more likely to cause injury. And here's the problem with that. When you engage in violence against another person, there is a limit to how much violence you can inflict on someone before their sense of fight or flight overwhelms their impulse control. At some point, their impulse control fails, the switch is flipped, and the individual retaliates, even if it goes against their morals, even if it goes against their sense of ethics, even if they feel bad about it, even if they love you and care about you and are protective toward you. And a lot of women don't understand this, but there's a huge difference in how you engage in violence when you're approaching someone with a goal of hurting them and engaging in violence versus when the violence happens out of your control because your self-control has been overwhelmed by your instincts. If I'm in a fight with someone and I'm like, I'm going to stop this fight, I'm going to hit this person and stop this fight, I might target to cause pain or fear or temporarily disable, but it's targeted. I know what I'm doing, and I have control over how hard I'm hitting, how much force I'm using, because my impulses are not overriding my impulse control. But if I'm in a situation where that's gone, fight or flight has taken over, and I am no longer guiding my actions by my intent, and they're happening out of my control, and I'm flailing, I can cause injury that I completely would never choose to cause. Right? That's when you see situations where somebody shoves a person after an adrenaline burst, and maybe they just intended to get that person away from them, but instead they shove them completely off the sidewalk and out into traffic, or through the wall, or down the stairs. And next thing you know, you hear about, well, he pushed me down the stairs or threw me down the stairs and I broke 2 bones. And it sounds like she's a victim. but she doesn't tell you that actually he was trying to push her away from him while she was trying to burn him in the face with her curling iron. So you end up in a situation where her violence leads to her injury. And feminists will respond to this with, so she deserves a beatdown for being violent. Like, no, that's not the argument. Right? The argument is that you don't push someone past their limits, that you need both parties in a relationship to be nonviolent in order for conflict to not result in injury, in order for people to be able to resolve their conflict in a way that makes both partners comfortable, at least, if not happy, and doesn't cause anybody any injury. But of course, feminists won't talk about that, right?
No, and what they do is they go Darvo.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they do: reverse the victim and offender. You know, oh, I got hurt, but I didn't have anything to do with it. I'm just a woman. He's the man. He was violent towards me. Well, you know, it's just insane what they are allowed to get away with. Just because they don't want to offend women, you know what I mean? You cannot blame women for anything. It's never their fault.
Yeah. It's never their fault.
And it's just, God. So this is a lot of relationships. I think you. I think I heard a different number that you said, but this was over 18,000 relationships. That's a lot.
Yep.
Good Lord. What my mind goes to is, because we always look at these numbers and these percentages of society, and well, how many women do we know that are walking around with undiagnosed mental illnesses?
Yep.
And let's overlap that with what's happening here if we can, and then even the ones that are, who's to say that they're actually taking their medication as prescribed? I don't know. I'm just going off on a tangent here, but
well, there's actually a really important point in regard to that. One of the things that Erin Pitsey figured out early on in her involvement with domestic violence research was a lot of people who engage in domestic violence in their relationships grew up in homes where domestic violence occurred. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I've had to learn about as a direct support professional for intellectually disabled adults is a type of PTSD called complex PTSD. Complex PTSD happens in circumstances where, rather than being in something like a combat zone, you're in an abusive environment or abusive and violent environment where there's a constant low grade of insecurity within the relationships and within the household that isn't life-threatening. It's maybe self-image threatening, confidence threatening, security threatening, that kind of thing. Maybe you're dealing with sexual violence, that the violence end of it is less dramatic and the emotional abuse side of it is more dramatic. Those kind of things. And so the individual shows symptoms of PTSD. They will have flashbacks. They will have hyper alertness under certain circumstances. They will have adaptive behaviors that are maybe dysfunctional in some ways. And people in their everyday lives can have symptoms of that are similar to, but not necessarily evidentiary of complex PTSD. Like, I don't like to back up in a vehicle, ever. I prefer, if I'm going to back up, I like to back into a location where there's unlikely to be a chance that another vehicle is going to come up behind me while I'm backing up and I miss that they've approached. So I'll back into a parking space to avoid having to back out, even if it's difficult. I'll walk 3 times as far in the parking lot to the grocery store to use a parking space that I can pull through one into another and then not have to back out, right? Because of how many times I've been a passenger in somebody else's car when they've been rear-ended, to the degree that my local friends joke that I've got a magnet in my ass. Probably what caused the mutations on the motherfucker gene. But yeah, and you know, that if I had a whole shitload of symptoms like that, they might turn around and say, well, is any of this connected? Because I did see my mother almost die in a car accident when I was 10. I was in the car. I just didn't get hurt. And when I got older, I had this realization one day that the reason I didn't die in that accident is because I had not morning sickness, but motion sickness. No, I did not have morning sickness at 10, feminists. Do not quote mine. Fuck you. But I had motion sickness, so I was laying on my left side with my head behind the driver and not on my right side with my head behind the passenger, and so I was not up against the door that got hit. And it's possible, right? Somebody could go through and say, well, all these things, you be next. But it's not comparable to what I've witnessed with people who have lived in environments where their needs were consistently not met, or and I mean not just the lower food, water, clothing, and stuff like that, but maybe they lived in an environment where they were treated as an inconvenience and nothing else. Not part of the family, not somebody to engage with. People didn't talk to them. They were manipulated as a physical object, you know, clothes put on them and taken off them like a doll, but not treated as a human being with wants and needs and social wants and needs. That can lead to it, right? So there are a variety of things that can happen that can cause sets of symptoms. There's another thing that can occur. You know, an individual who's been raised in a violent environment, who's been hit in the head a bunch of times, can have post-concussion syndrome. And post-concussion syndrome can cause difficulties dealing with conflict in particular, and difficulties in a cooperative environment, like a relationship. So you get somebody who has an abusive personality. Maybe they were also raised in an abusive violent environment, and they get into a relationship with somebody who has complex PTSD from an abusive, like a repeated, prolonged situation of abuse, a situation where they've grown up in that environment, and they can anticipate and they learn to change their behavior in order to avoid the types of explosions that happen in those abusive environments. It creates a predisposition for that individual to be victimized by the individual that's abusing them, and it creates a predisposition for both parties' patterns of behavior that they brought with them from their abusive violent environments to happen in their relationship. And that's pretty much how cyclical violence happens. You're more likely to connect up with somebody who's been raised in an environment like that. And I'm not going to disclose a lot, but within my extended family, I've observed those patterns. And interestingly, there's 2 ways that can go. I've seen partners put solid effort into breaking the cycle and learning everything they can about the dysfunction within the cycle and how to not continue it. And then I've also seen people go the opposite direction, and then the next generation and the next and the next, until somebody's completely dysfunctional. Somebody's daughter or granddaughter or son or grandson is completely dysfunctional and commits a crime and gets killed in the process, or dies seizing on the sidewalk with a needle in their arm. So these are things that when you look at this, and we talk about mom and dad both being violent, husband and wife both being violent, boyfriend and girlfriend both being violent. The reason that's important is because when you don't have a solid rock in a family who is nonviolent, when you don't have somebody who is the example of what not to, or what to do instead of doing what the people that are the example of what not to do are doing, it's very difficult for individuals to break that cycle. And you get the next cycle and the next, and it gets worse every generation until somebody is just completely broken and can't survive. So it does have to be addressed, and it does have to be dealt with. I don't know if that makes sense, but because of that, you're going to see relationships where, and it most times it'll be, if you see in research, it'll be a majority. If people who have grown up in abusive and violent environments have more of a tendency to connect with each other based on their experiences and recognizing each other's patterns of behavior and stuff, then you're also going to see the ones who continue the pattern of violence are going to be attracted to the ones who are going to reciprocate it, if that makes sense. And in particular, women who continue the pattern of provocative violence are going to be attracted to men who continue the pattern of reactive violence, and vice versa. And does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you would see, like with this, the discussion about greater injury with reciprocal violence than non-reciprocal violence, because that pattern puts you totally out of control. Farther down in here, see if I can find, yeah. One of the things cited in this study, a recent meta-analysis found that a woman's perpetration of violence was the strongest predictor for her being a victim of partner violence. In other words, while feminists like to demonize men as violent abusers that use their violence to control women's overall behavior, to dominate, and so on, the reality is that in circumstances where women are reporting abuse, their report of abuse is actually, he hit me back.
That's their defense.
Yeah. That's their complaint. He hit me back.
Yeah.
And they expect an arrest. So, and now there have been feminist claims that when women engage in reciprocal violence, it's always self-defense. But there's also relationships where both sexes are just violent. And there's also, so not all acts of reciprocal violence between men and women are self-defense by the man or self-defense by the woman. Some of them are just, and this is the 7 Years in Hell case, the second relationship that the perpetrator was in with the guy that was the reason why the victim got custody of the child that she was then making false accusations in order to get back. So husband number 2, she and husband number 2 used to just beat the hell out of each other. and that was sort of their pastime. And it wasn't she hit him and he hit her back. She initiated more often, but they beat on each other. So if he was mad, he would hit. If she was mad, she would hit. And that was their relationship. I don't understand it, but that was their relationship. The local domestic violence victims advocacy organization that was supporting her, however, characterized it as she is a person who fights back. And so when she is a victim of violence, her defense kicks in. Or when she anticipates violence, her defense kicks in and she initiates. And that was we hear that all the time from feminists. The claim that when a woman initiates violence, she's actually engaging in quote-unquote preemptive self-defense against his violence.
That's so ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. Imagine a man trying to use that kind of line of defense. Oh, well, I thought she was going to hit me, so I just smacked the bitch across the face. I knocked her.
For it.
Yeah.
She deserved it. No man would ever get away with that. It would be grounds for his arrest by itself. But it's the main impetus behind this whole feminist idea that women's violence doesn't count against men. Alison was talking about this in her epic Twitter thread today. This was a feminist's response to the findings that domestic violence it goes both ways, and so they had to scramble for an excuse for why women do domestic violence on men. So that they had a further excuse to only arrest the man. This is what led to the Duluth model that has been rolled out across the rest of the states and across the rest of the world, and it's been that way ever since. It's been accepted as an academic truth ever since. It can't be bidirectional because men deserve to be beaten or economically or psychologically violenced against or whatever it is. But of course we don't call it that. Do it, man. We don't call that anything. It's just I'm going to go ahead and call it making men uncomfortable. Would you believe that some women enjoy making men uncomfortable? I'm referring to this new Star Wars cunt who's making the rounds today.
Oh dear.
As soon as it was, yeah, you'll discover that in due course. We'll probably talk about it next week on the news shows.
Probably. I haven't actually kept up with Star Wars since Disney destroyed it.
Oh, we're entering the next phase of feminist cunts destroying Disney, in all manner of things that I'm going to go ahead and call violence, entertainment violence. Let's call it that.
There we go. It's really amazing when you look at how they did this, and I've seen it. I don't have it on hand, but I've seen a paper that was written by a feminist academic and company, where they came up with the formula for calling female violence defensive when it's aggressive. So they characterized it in a way where they said the same thing was defense against inappropriate treatment when the treatment was coming from a man and a woman was violent. But it's not defense against, it's aggressive and controlling when the same treatment was coming from a woman and a man was violent. And the example was things like, they would say a man might be violent to control a woman's behavior, to get the preferred behavior out of her. But then a woman might be violent because she's feeling disrespected, which is when you boil it down, violence to control another person's behavior to get the preferred behavior out of them.
Yeah, I feel violated I feel violated every time I open my paycheck and the government decides to take their cut.
Yeah. Yeah, what they have decided is their cut without your input.
Right.
That is violence because it's enforced at the tip of a gun, as in when you don't pay up.
It's
Yeah, I want a line item veto tax form where you get to tick off the boxes like, okay, yes, I'll help pay for this, I'll help pay for that, but if you don't, it doesn't get funded.
Yeah.
See what happens. I bet the size of the government would shrink real fast.
Absolutely. Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah, that'll never happen.
No.
But yeah, excusing female violence because the partner disrespected her. Like maybe he said something inappropriate. I've gone through and actually made a scenario up to explain why that's terrible. Right? It's disrespectful to approach a stranger in the street and say something denigrating and sexually explicit, maybe about their genitalia, right? Maybe about their relationship, maybe about their disease status, whatever. But if a woman does it to a man, people think it's funny. If a man does it to a woman, it's a slap-worthy offense.
And this is ridiculous because you don't have the right to respect.
Mm-mm.
I mean, I'm sorry. Your actions are out on public display for the court of public opinion to make a decision about you. And, respect is earned. I keep saying it. I keep feeling like I have to remind people of this. You don't just get respect because you're old or your skin is this shade or whatever you identify as. Whatever, you don't deserve respect. Respect is something that you earned by showing the same to other people.
Right.
And by respecting yourself. I don't respect someone who doesn't respect themselves.
Like, there's obviously, people use the word respect to mean different things. Feminists in particular, women in particular, don't really understand what it means.
No.
But, for instance, my friends and I growing up, when we were in our neighborhood, I knew which girls were stronger than me and didn't use that against me. And I knew which girls were weaker than me, and I didn't use it against them. And there was a respect for that behavior, that this person is being gentle with me. I won't provoke, right? And that's a form of respect. And then there's also, I knew if somebody stole my stuff, I knew at least one or two people that there was just no way I was going to accuse them. And I have respect for them based on the integrity that they displayed, that told me without me having to ever have any doubts, well, it's not that person, that person didn't do it, right? And there are things like that. And then there's also somebody in a position of authority, or somebody with a greater capability than you in a particular area, or things like that. And then there's basic human decency, which isn't those types of respect. It's not veneration. It's not it's consideration. It's not consideration for a quality that is unique to that individual. It's consideration for the individual's experiences that you might inflict. Basically, it's a sense of accountability. And a lot of times women use the word respect when they mean a combination of veneration and accountability for causing experiences. and that you're more accountable for the experiences you cause them because they're female and they should be on that pedestal. You should venerate them. That's their belief. So when I say women don't understand respect, that's basically what I'm talking about. And women don't even uphold the social contract that men and women used to have, under which it was presumed that women deserved that veneration. I don't think women ever did. I don't think either sex ever did.
No.
But
No.
women got it. And then they didn't want to uphold their end of the deal, right? So it's fair to say...
They didn't have to. They didn't have to. Once they got it,
yeah, that's
you
true.
know, and I think that a big proponent of that was this, you know, the mother, you know, I can't think of the word, but you know, once the mother became like this unquestionable being, right? We all had to just venerate the mother.
Right.
That's really when it just kind of took hold, because once women had that ability to pull that card, oh, forget it. You know, and now nothing they can do or nothing that they do can be held against them. I'm a mother. You can't talk about me.
Yeah. Oh, and the single motherhood thing. We do it all. We do both jobs. No,
right.
you don't. You don't even do one. You don't even fully do the mother's job. Part of
You
your
don't
job is
even
to find
do-
a partner to raise your child with, and you couldn't even do that.
You don't even do half of the job of the half of the job that you should be doing.
Yeah.
Okay, because you're out here trying to figure out how to uphold the other half of the half.
Yeah.
You know, oh no, I do it all. I do everything. No, you listen. You work hard. Okay, granted, I'll give you that. I will give you that. Even the one.
How many checks do you get in the mail that didn't come from a job that you do?
Thank
That's
you.
That's the question.
Thank you.
Thank you. I get none.
Right.
0.
Not a 1.
That's right.
Not a 1. Not a 1. But, you know, and again, our family court system has allowed this to happen. Again, it's just women get the rewards while men go through the fucking war and
yeah,
put their lives on the lines for this shit just to make sure that, you know, women are okay, because they got, you know, their arm was bruised after they fucking tried to throw a left hook at the guy that they love and chose to have a kid with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's really, it's heartbreaking for a lot of reasons. Not the least of which is, you know, there's a devouring mother, and then there's the, I don't know what to call this one, the blob mother. She writes her life over your life, and she erases you, but she's not doing it because she's worried that bad things are going to happen to you, and her only way to control it is to control every aspect of your life. It's because you are the accessory to her ego. Her kids are her purse puppies, or her kids are her badge of honor, her shield from accountability, her sign of having some sort of meaning in the world. Whoops. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I just stepped on my cord for my headset, and I was afraid I broke it.
Their kids are their sex trophies.
Oh God, that's awful.
But that's what it is.
I don't want anybody thinking of my kids and sex in the same thought. I don't want to think of that. I mean, they're adults. I know they're gonna go do their thing. I don't need to think about that either. But yeah. Anyway, just like you don't want to think about your parents doing it, you don't want to think about your kids either.
Oh man, I have a friend who has his daughter is a young woman. She's over 21, right? Which is crazy to me because I met him when she was like 7. Anyway, she's beautiful, beautiful young girl. And he's like, oh yeah, she sent me a picture of her with her boyfriend, and I was like, they doing it right.
Like that's not no parent wants to hear that. Right? I'm glad that all 3 of my kids found partners that make them happy and that they enjoy making happy. They're happy, and that's what matters, right? That they're happy and they have happy families and they're enjoying their lives and they're doing what they want to do, and they're not, dealing with pain and suffering that comes from horrible dysfunction or anything like that. That's what I wanted for them, and that's the tool. I gave them the best tools I could to make that happen for themselves, and be able to set their goals. We want to do these things, and this is how we're going to do them, and then go out and do. And that's basically parenting. That's what you do. But yeah, you see a lot of single moms, or it's more like they'll put their child's picture on their social media. I don't have any money for his Christmas presents this year, and they got a pair of 6-foot-long eyelashes coming off of their face that you're like, how much did you pay for those?
Exactly. And that's the difference between women that want to be parents and women that just get pregnant and have kids.
Yeah. Why don't you have money for your kid's Christmas, but you have money for 15 shades of lipstick and that suction device you use to make it look like somebody was trying to turn you into a duck?
Well,
or somebody beat you up.
That's a whole other conversation. But that's what social media has done. The GoFundMe era. Shit, GoFundMe is kind of like old school. They don't even. Well, I mean, yeah, of course, people still use that, but like, no, it's just people use social media for attention. That's what it is. It's that dopamine hit.
What's interesting is a lot of these women in the 90s, instead of GoFundMe online, it was just go fuck a man, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he buys her things. And now they just stick their tits in the camera and, oh, look, I got money. Those
exactly.
Like, I don't know. I've always liked getting a paycheck from a job.
I mean, I'm amazed at the sheer number of like, porn actresses. They've been around for freaking decades by now, like that. But this new era of the online OnlyFans girl.
Yeah,
I can't believe how many of them there are.
Look at my tits. I'm a single mom and I can't make ends meet.
Oh my God, you just push your tits up in the camera and there you go. You sell your body for $5 or $10 a month. And, some of these girls are making good livings, really good livings, which says a whole lot about society and some of the men, people who are willing to pay for this kind of content. I don't know. It's
well, and
just...
I'll be honest. I don't mind nudity. I don't mind the existence of porn.
Yeah,
it's what
absolutely not.
Me, what really bothers me is that every girl expects to be a star. Every girl expects to handle it. And then also every girl expects to be treated exactly the same way and thought of exactly the same way. That is, as a non-sexual person 90% of the time, when what the people who know them know about them primarily is their sexual presentation. Because old school porn stars were, their persona was sensuality, and they cultivated it and they enjoyed it. And not just porn stars, also movie stars. The blonde bombshells, like Mae West's whole shtick was her sexuality. And it's not for everybody. It's not evil or shameful or nasty when it is the relationship that you have with the world necessarily, but it's you have to be prepared for the fact that if you're going to embark on that relationship with the world, that's the relationship you're telling the world that you want, and you should be prepared to enjoy that relationship and not demand that when they're paying you for that relationship, you get that relationship, and then the rest of the time you get treated like you're a nun, or it's just, today we have women who are trying to capitalize on their sexuality the way Mae West capitalized on her sexuality, but then they turn around and complain about being sexualized. Well, who the fuck did that? Who sexualized you? That was you, lady. You took a paycheck for your sexuality, for having a relationship with the world that was, my relationship with the world is, I'm hot and you want me. And, and look at my tits. And I'm going to shake my shoulders and you can see everything underneath jiggle. And it's not bad that you have that relationship. It's bad that you're condemning people for expecting that relationship that you said you wanted.
Right.
But yeah. So when
like it's just because every time you turn around, you can't look anywhere without finding some of these chicks. Like they're everywhere.
I showed the world my ass, and now everybody talks about my ass. I don't understand why.
And again, I think a part of this has to do with the short attention span of the internet, because a lot of these people are on TikTok, and everything is now just a YouTube short. These people have short attention spans, but so there's a lot of them in a lot of short little clips, and it's like, I don't know. It's just amplified among these young women that this is what it is. Because everybody, oh God,
yeah.
Like, isn't the whatever podcast? Isn't that's all like OnlyFans chicks?
Oh God,
right?
I don't know. I would not want to listen to that.
I've never have, besides like, the highlighted viral videos that happen every now and then. But, these women want to be there. They want to be on that stage.
If I'm going to listen to a woman talk about that stuff, I'm going to listen to, somebody who's been in porn for 15 years on purpose, because that person's going to be going to enjoy it and be excited about it, right? Or I'm going to listen to Anna Cherry. I'll listen to her talk about it because she's towed that line of, this is the relationship I have with the world and I'm wallowing in it, right? Or I'm enjoying it. I'm doing this, and you're not bad for accepting it from me and reciprocating. Right?
Yeah, and not only that, but she has something to say about it.
Right.
Like she really has an insight about at least her particular set of people. But
right. I want to hear from women who actually are who view what they do as a two-way engagement and recognize their agency in that engagement. I don't want to hear jack shit from women who are going to sit around and whine about people being involved in a two-way engagement, financial engagement with them, and say, well, they're taking advantage of my boobs, and shit. Like, I don't want to hear that. Go fuck yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah. So when we talk about, to get back into the study, one of the things I wanted to point out here, again, when we talk about this, we're not worried uniquely or solely about this percentage of men experience it versus this percentage of women. This happens. Women do it more, men do it more. When we talk about who does it more, part of the reason for discussing that is the fact that feminists make the claim that men do it more, therefore it must be this, and therefore it's okay to ignore their experience of it, and therefore it's okay to generalize to all men, even though the overwhelming majority of men don't do it, right? But the other thing is, when we talk about this and we talk about age groups, it provides a tool for being able to address the personality traits or mental hang-ups or dysfunction that someone has learned. There may be a mental health condition, maybe like PTSD, maybe like an obsessive compulsive thing, maybe anger management problems, whatever, that cause an individual to engage in that kind of behavior, so that they develop the tools to handle conflict or adversity without engaging in that kind of behavior. And people who are victimized, to learn the tools to recognize risks for that kind of behavior and how to protect themselves and avoid relationships or circumstances that would lead to that kind of behavior. So up here on this screen, in the middle of this paragraph, several studies have found that men and women initiate against an intimate partner at approximately the same rate. For example, Gray and Fauci specifically asked adolescents, and this is interesting because adolescents have a very different level of development, I guess you could say, of control over themselves. They're in the midst of the most impulse-heavy and self-control light part of their lives since the terrible twos, because their hormones are out of control. So, specifically asking adolescents about their initiation of violence, they found that among the violent relationship studied, 66% were characterized by both partners initiating violence at least once. Now, if they only asked at least once, versus, did you at least once? Well, how about frequently? And then you find out one partner or the other is more frequent. That'd be a different story. But that's as far as that got. In the National Family Violence Survey, both men and women reported that violence was initiated by each partner at least 40% of the time. Additionally, studies of community samples found that a relatively low percentage of women endorsed self-defense as a primary motive for violence. So, when feminists claim that two-way violence is men attacking their female partners and their female partners defending themselves, between these three studies, what you're seeing is, in adolescence, both sexes are initiating violence at least once. In the national survey, at least 40% of the time, both sexes, each partner is initiating violence at least 40% of the time. And community samples found that very low percentage of women endorse self-defense as their primary motive. So they're initiating, they're not just engaging in self-defense. So these data, they didn't look at men, but these data suggest self-defense cannot fully explain the reciprocal violence phenomenon. So that indicates that when we're told that reciprocal violence doesn't excuse men from being demonized as the primary perpetrators of violence, it's bullshit. It's all bullshit. They're just talking out their asses.
Of course.
Yeah. And then I'm going to add to this. Right, so the basis for the belief that men are the primary perpetrators most of the time and women are defending themselves is the Duluth model that was created by Ellen Pence, and I can't remember the other ladies that were involved in it. Pence is the most famous of the creators of the Duluth model, and she wrote a book on the subject called Coordinating Community Responses to Domestic Violence. Dang it, I was not intending to select everything on the page. Lessons from Duluth and Beyond, that sort of explained this. And in her chapter, Some Thoughts on Philosophy, she she admitted something that I don't know if she intended it to be seen the way that it ended up being seen. So, feminists accuse men of being violent in order to control their partner. She says as much here, that they accuse men of being violent in order to get control or power. The difference is semantic, not is not semantic, it's ideological. She said, somewhere we shifted from understanding the violence as rooted in a sense of entitlements to rooted in a desire for power. And even the idea that it's rooted in a sense of entitlements, in my opinion, is bullshit. I'm going to expand this because I'm having trouble seeing it. My eyes are so crappy, you guys.
Mine too.
It's that damn mutation on the motherfucker gene. There, let's see if I can get this to be actually big. Really? Because it was big before. God damn it. Alright, we'll see what I can do here. This is going to look weird, but once I'm done, it'll work, I think. There we go. Now I can re-shrink that. Maybe? What the? Alright, damn it. Put it right here. I hate the way this works sometimes. I would like to be able to just tell my computer what to do and have it do it and have it stay that way. Is this really gonna keep? Alright. One more. Now, if I close that. It wasn't doing that earlier. I swear to you guys, it was not snapping back earlier. This pisses me off. What happens if I toggle full screen? So that's not really full screen. Then I lose the page, of course. Is there a... Of course not, and I can't search Some Thoughts on Philosophy there. Go back to the Wikipedia page and read the truncated part. For fuck's sake, everything's gotta be hard. That's the chapter. But it won't let me go to that chapter. Good grief. So let's see. We don't need to read the whole understanding the... There we go. Some Thoughts on Philosophies. So again, the dumb thing about this is it doesn't give you all the pages, so we're skipping from page 6 to page 29. Alright. The difference, let's see, by determining that the need or desire for power was the motivating force behind battering, we created a conceptual framework that, in fact, did not fit the lived experience of many of the men and women we were working with. So in other words, feminists applied feminist philosophy to the environment they were working in and the people they were working with without actually finding out if it applied first. The DAIP, which was the name of the shelter they were in, staff, like the therapist insisting it was an anger control problem, or the judge wanting to see it as an alcohol problem, or the defense attorney arguing that it was a defective wife problem. I love the way they phrase that, like, you know, it completely covers for any behavior that the wife might have engaged in that was violent herself, that he might have been defending against, or anything like that, right? It's a defective wife problem. Remained undaunted by the difference in our theory and actual experiences of those we were working with. We all engaged in ideological practices and claimed them to be neutral observations. Eventually, we began to give into the process that is the heart of the Duluth model: interagency, communication based on discussions of real cases. It was the cases themselves that created the chink in each of our theoretical suits of armor. So here she's basically admitting that they work with all these people, and their cases don't match their beliefs about these cases. And each time their belief armor was affected, right, damaged, but they still maintained it. And later she goes on, speaking for myself, I found that many of the men I interviewed did not seem to articulate a desire for power over their partner, although I relentlessly took every opportunity to point out to men in the groups that they were so motivated and merely in denial. The fact that few men ever articulated such a desire went unnoticed by me and many of my coworkers. Eventually, we realized that we were finding what we had already predetermined to find. The DAIP staff were interpreting what men seemed to expect or feel entitled to as a desire. When we had to start explaining women's violence toward their partners, lesbian violence, and the violence of men who did not like what they were doing, we were brought back to our original undeveloped thinking that the violence is rooted in how social relationships, i.e., our example marriage, and the rights people feel entitled to within them are socially, not privately, constructed. So here they are, recognizing this, and yet what did they do? They created the Duluth model, the power and control wheel, and all of that, and they used it not only to train other shelters, other shelter staff, but to advocate for changes in law and policy in the United States and in other countries, to mandate how the police and the court system respond to allegations of abuse.
Disgusting.
Yeah. So does it matter if domestic violence is mostly female initiated? Somewhat, yeah. Because it tells us that one of our areas of weakness in relationships and human relationships is that women don't have a taboo against violence, the same taboo against violence that men have. We need that taboo to be expanded. But is it the whole story? No. Right? A big part of the story is that the motivations and causes of domestic violence are being badly mischaracterized by feminists in a manner that demonizes men and handicaps systems that are in place with society's intent to help people in these relationships stop engaging in this dysfunction, and causes them to fail to provide that help. That's the biggest of the problems. But what do we get from Michael Flood? This claim that MRAs think men are victimized 33% more often than women, and that it's based on a study that isn't about domestic violence.
I'm sorry if I've already said this before, but I wonder if he's actually read the studies that he cited.
I'm sure he has. I'm sure he picked through them very carefully for things that prove his point and disprove ours, or what he thinks our point is. Oh, and he has another complaint about this. Let's see. So he says women suffer more violence overall, and then has this list and a table. Yes, he says, men suffer more physical violence than women. And remember, this is not by intimate partners, but by people connected to the institution. physical violence, as opposed to violence that is not physical.
Right.
So in other words, women suffer more overall abuse, according to this study, in the workplace. Men suffer, of the types of abuse that men suffer, they suffer violence more than women do.
Women experience the rainbow of violence, right? Men
of
just
abuse,
get
anyway.
Well, yes, yes, but men just the only thing they ever experience is physical violence. And yes, so what that it happens more to men, but
Yeah.
there's other types of violence that affect women, and so we have to focus on that. That's what's more important here. That's
Are we running into the Rogan defense? Yes, men are more victimized by violence, but sometimes it's done by men. So
Yes.
Men don't count as victims.
Yes, that's the next sentence, in fact. A third issue
Oh wow!
is that the study does not tell us who perpetrated the violence. For example, most violence against men in universities may be by other men.
Good Lord.
Yes, and that's the reason that they're targeting men and not women, because men are viewed as appropriate targets for violence, regardless of who is perpetrating. Right? But if a man is the perpetrator, only men are viewed as acceptable targets. Women are not. So that's the other
most violence enacted on humans is enacted by other humans.
Yeah.
So it basically doesn't happen.
Yep. Well, and to be honest, feminists have their way of framing things all the time. So, for instance, Chrissy and Bob are dating, and Chrissy wants to stay in the relationship, and Bob doesn't like her anymore because something is incompatible about them, and he says, I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, goodbye. So Chrissy gets upset, and she tells George that Bob did something awful to her. Doesn't matter what it was. George is now angry. George goes and beats the shit out of Bob. Feminists will view that as male violence. But was George ever going to beat Bob up until Chrissy said those things to him? Till he saw Chrissy's tears.
Till she opened her fucking mouth. Of course not. No.
Right? They do not discuss proxy violence.
No.
Right? Chrissy and Bob are walking down the street together, and they're in a heated argument, and Chrissy is in tears over the argument. George assumes Bob hit Chrissy and shoves him up against the wall and threatens him. Again, feminists would call that male violence. They might even call it toxic masculinity, unless, Bob actually hit Chrissy, and then they'd be like, well, that's George's job. He's supposed to do that. And when you ask them what toxic masculinity is, they'll describe the thing that they just did.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Good little soldiers.
Yep. So when we talk about these types of studies and these types of violence, we're looking at nuance, right? When you're looking at, yes, there are different types of abuse. Relational aggression happens to women more. It's usually perpetrated by other women. It's how we fight with each other as adults, because we don't hit each other anymore. And some women are very good at it, and some women aren't. And then we get diagnosed as autistic. But, physical aggression, you're going to see more male victims. You're going to see their perpetrators being male, because it is more acceptable in society for men to just duke things out when they're mad at each other. And also, men are more acceptable targets in society when men are going to be committing violence. And then, of course, when it's things like muggings, you go for the person who's more likely to have the money. Or the person who's more likely to be walking alone at night, and not somebody who's got somebody that's going to be dedicated to protecting them. It's a lot more dangerous to attack a woman who has a man there to protect her than it would be to attack that guy if he was walking alone, because his attitude is going to be entirely different, and his behavior will too.
I'm sorry, I was just going to add, like, even if he's walking with a woman, he can size the woman up and say, you know what, I can fucking take her, and still go after the man. You know what I mean? That's not it's not always a guarantee.
Yeah. What I'm saying is this, right? A guy, if you mug a guy walking down the street by himself, he may decide that his wallet is not worth his life, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you mug a girl walking with her boyfriend, same guy. The guy that would decide his wallet is not worth his life might decide her purse is, or might decide her tears are, or her fear is. He'll fight to the death for her. So a guy that's going to commit that kind of crime isn't going to target a couple unless he can't find anybody else and he's desperate, or he has a gun. He's not like that scene in Crocodile Dundee. That's not a knife. That's a knife. That's an unlikely scenario, just because most guys don't want to confront a guy who has a woman to protect from them. But yeah, like I just, everything about this is stupid. And the way that he wrote about this, and starting with, and of course he's claiming that Mike Buchanan and men's rights front organizations have issued press releases on this study, but I haven't seen one, and I follow Mike on Twitter, so I'm I'm calling bullshit on that too. So, but anyway, so that's the article. I think I've shared all of the actual data that I wanted to share to compare with what he was claiming, and I'm not gonna open up his links because let's take him at his word and say everything he says about the study is correct. It still doesn't make it false that men do experience violence from women more than women do from men in terms of intimate partner relationships. There are other studies that prove that that's true, and it also doesn't make that our only issue. Looking into did we get any super chats? I think we might got one. Let me see if I got.
Yeah, there was one. I'm not sure if it's worth reading, but there was one.
Yeah, let's see what we got here. So, Albert Nader Retro gave us $5 Canadian and said, "Whatever, fresh and fit, Pearly, Tate, Justin, Waller." I don't know who that last person is. Actually, I don't know fresh and fit either. Snake oil salesmen and hypocrites. I don't know. I don't know enough about most of them. I think Pearly is more traditionalist and is new to a lot of these issues. And I've been watching her learn new things and change her mind about different things. So that's interesting. It indicates that she's open to growth, which is important for a woman in the movement. We have to be able to be wrong.
In any case, even the junk food version of men's issues advocacy is 1,000 times better than even the haughtiest academic feminism.
Well, that's true too.
So if you could focus your ire on the feminists who are destroying the fucking world, rather than the slightly less intellectually rigorous men's issues advocates, that would be fucking great.
Yeah. I don't know most of the rest of these people, but I haven't been really. I think Andrew Tate's been blown all out of proportion. I'm not really deeply impressed with him, but I don't think he's the demon that everybody's making him out to be either. He's just a guy who has things to say, and people.
Well, see, that's
over it.
That right there is the problem, Hannah, with this person who sent this super chat, we're not allowed, if we don't outright condemn the people in this list and in this super chat, then we're the hypocrites. We're fucking sellouts.
See, I don't go in with purity testing either.
This same exactly, and that's my stance as well, and I believe that's Mike's stance as well. But this person who has sent emails, some very flagrant things said in those emails, also said that they wouldn't come back. They're not supporting. Well, you're here, and thank you for your $5 super chat. But I'm sorry, I'm not gonna put these people's heads on a pike just because you want me to.
My way of dealing with all of this stuff is, if somebody says something that I disagree with, I'm going to disagree with what they have to say, and I'm going to tell them why. Yep. I'll present my evidence. If they present something to me to back what they've said, that I haven't seen it before, and it changes the scenario enough that I can look at it and say, oh yeah, well, that's a contributing factor, and my opinion moves this direction, this distance, then it's my job to tell them that, right? That's how you deal with disagreement. But I don't like the idea of purity testing, because everybody has different life experience, and everybody has learned things different ways. So, for instance, there are other avenues of life, other aspects of your life where you make decisions similar to my hang-up about backing up in my car. And it's not even that I can't see what I'm doing or I'm not confident. I'm really good at it. I can back up in and out of very tight spaces with big vehicles and everything. It's just my way of being careful in that way. But if I'm riding in someone else's car and they don't do that, I'm not going to nag them. And it's the same way in life. If I have my marriage relationship with my husband one way, and somebody else wants to have a different avenue of relationship, maybe their relationship is more sexually volatile, or maybe their relationship is more like they go to casinos together all the time, or like different pastimes than we have, or they need more alone time from each other than we take from each other. Like that's their relationship, and I'm not going to tell people that it's the wrong way to have that relationship. If I approach getting legislative change done by contacting legislators and writing letters and sending information and evidence, and somebody else goes and actually sits in their office and talks face to face with them, I'm not going to say you're doing it wrong because you didn't put it in writing. Right? And if somebody says false accusers should be punished for what they do, the same as any other criminal, because it's in violation of our laws what they're doing, and everybody needs to be held accountable, and they say nothing about the victims, I don't care. As long as they're suggesting the same thing, accountability needs to be had. If they have a different reason for why they want that accountability, the fact that they're pushing for accountability is enough for me. Right? So there's that. When you look at these different people that come to men's rights activism from different philosophies, they're atheists in the movement. I'm a Christian. I'm not going to say atheists can't be part of the movement, and I expect them to not say Christians can't be part of the movement. And at the same time, I'm not going to say that Christianity is a pathway to men's rights. It's a pathway to a spiritual relationship with deity. That's it. And it's an individual thing. You don't have to be man or woman to be part of the men's rights movement. You don't have to be a parent or be childless. You can be either one. And even people who are traditionalist or anti-traditionalist have things to contribute. Right? They may have different beliefs. We can argue about vehemently even about all of those things. Right? That's fine. That's how we hash out ideas. It's how we decide what's right and wrong for us. And it's how we get things done. But at the end of the day, we're all part of a very large group of people that has recognized that our legislation at the federal level and at the state level is discriminatory toward men and is causing damage to families and dysfunction, widespread dysfunction within our society that is leading to a whole host of problems that trace back to a combination of fatherlessness and ill treatment of men and boys. And we're all working on that from our own angles. So, I will argue to the end of the earth with someone who I think is wrong about their beliefs on the subject, or their a particular approach that I think isn't going to work or is going to do damage or something, or to telling people that if you care about men, you have to do this or you have to do that. But I don't believe in kicking people out of the movement and saying, well, you can't be one, you can't sit with us anymore because I don't like your methods. I don't like your beliefs about this one thing. I think that's very counterproductive.
If you don't like Pearl, if you don't like Tate, if you don't like Fresh and Fit, don't watch their content. And in your world, they won't exist except for other people who are complaining about them. If you don't like feminism, you can't just ignore it. It's still in charge of universities and schools.
And the government.
And the government. And now the police force and the army. Focus on the things that you can't make go away just by ignoring them. It's pretty simple, really.
Oh, yeah. Let's see. Xeranx gave us $10 and said, Pearl recently had Paul Elam, Aaron Clary, and 2 others on. Her associate spoke with Allison, Chandler, and others. Even if they're grifters, using them to get the message out is better than not. True.
Absolutely.
So, and I will say this, just because somebody makes money doesn't make them a grifter. It's like calling a doctor a grifter because they charge a fee for their work. Or a journalist, if you do a job and you get paid for it and you're not lying to people about what you're doing for them, right? You're not pretending to affect things that you don't affect or to achieve things that you don't achieve, then you're not a grifter. If you tell people that your job is spreading information and hashing out ideas, providing a space for ideas to be hashed out, and getting people to consider those ideas, and you do that job, and when people pay you to do that job, their expectation is that's what you're going to do, and you do it, and you're meeting their expectations, that's not grifting, right? Grifting is when you claim that you are solving a problem when you're in fact exacerbating it. By doing things like creating a whole model for evaluating the problem that actually hides the causes and contributing factors and prevents people from being able to create solutions that address those causes and contributing factors. That's grifting. That's feminism. So let's see. In the Super Chow channel, we have... So after Brian said he was done yesterday at 5:07, Zapier gave us $5 without a message, so thank you, Zapier, for that. Today, right after the show started, Meredith G gave us $5 and said HBR Talk 290, honey for the Badgers. I've noticed in my life that female bullies tend to pick on other people they either know or they believe can't fight back. Bullies in general are like that. Female bullies do it with relational aggression. Male bullies do it with physical aggression. And both cases, they're shocked. They just get the shit shocked out of them when you actually turn out to be able to defend yourself. The difference is, male bullies, once they realize that actually you can defend yourself, you can fight back, they show some respect for that, and they stop trying to bully you. And sometimes they'll even become your friend, and in some cases, they'll even stop being a bully. Female bullies resent the fact that you were able to defend yourself, and you by doing so, you just started a war. And it's all your fault. Like, that's been my experience my whole life with bullies. And I'm pretty good at triggering them into attack completely unintentionally, to the degree where there have been numerous times where I've gotten into fights growing up that I had no idea what the hell we were fighting about. Let's see. She says, I've watched it with female relatives, with bosses and coworkers. Yep, same here. Sleepy Aussie gave us, okay, that looks like a really big number, but it's actually $100 and then $10. Thank you very much for the $110. For a minute, I'm like, we did not just get like $1 billion from this person. It's got to be foreign currency that is, but thank you, Sleepy Aussie. Sleepy Aussie says, you couldn't tell if those women were women or cats, Hannah. Maybe they were female dogs. Also, first show I've caught live in a while. Keep up the good work. Yeah, women get very catty when they fight. And again, there's a difference between cats and dogs fighting. Like, both cats and dogs are a lot faster than humans, so the motion in the fight is a lot faster. But dogs get physical a lot sooner than cats. Cats have this thing where they'll like pat each other with the ends of their paws, but most of the fight is yelling and screaming.
Yeah,
and arching their back.
Well, you say that, but
puffing
you
up.
might have seen dogs on either side of a fence.
Oh yeah, they
sort
bark
of
at each
growl
other
and
a
bare
lot.
their teeth, and then the moment you open the fence, they go, "Oh, hi."
Yeah, start sniffing each other's butts. Yeah.
A lot of it's for show.
Yeah.
No animal is perfect. They're all full of shit in some way.
Oh yeah, they don't want to fight.
Like, children are not pure. Animals are not pure. They all have some version of lies and deception.
Yeah.
Trust no one.
It's funny. Now, cats will, like, there's a cat that we don't have a cat, but there is a cat in the neighborhood who is completely unaware of that fact. He lives on our porch, and he won't let any other cats come on our porch. And he's very aggressive. He's very he doesn't yowl. He just chases them down silently and starts beating the hell out of them if they come too close. He's very territorial. Now, I've seen him hiss, and he got in between my husband and my husband's boss and hissed at the boss in my husband's defense because they were standing too close together to have a conversation, which was hilarious. You know, what are you going to do to this person who's like 8 times your size? But in any case, yeah. And he is a tomcat, and he's fixed. Like, he does not have as his excuse that he wasn't fixed. He's fixed. He's fixed, and he's had his rabies shot. Because he was spreading baby kittens all over the neighborhood. So the locals, there's an organization that does that to prevent cats from ending up starving to death in areas where, like, around apartment complexes and stuff, where they congregate around dumpsters and stuff. But he didn't even know he was broken. But so he doesn't have, like, people think, oh, the cat's aggressive because he's not fixed. No, he's fixed. He's still aggressive. But yeah. So women fight like cats. Most cats, though. This cat fights like a dog. Anonymous gave us $5 and said, I forgot to mention this in the last stream, but years ago I stumbled upon a 4chan thread discussing eunuchs and the transgender community's views on sex reassignment surgery. I was researching the presence of misandry within the trans community and came across a particular post. It featured a picture of a woman holding up a man's scrotum and testicles while smiling. She held them up as if sprinkling salt and had a huge grin on her face. The disturbing article Brian covered reminded me of that post. There is a significant amount of internalized misandry within the trans community. So this is something we talked about clear back when we were on Blog Talk Radio. And it was noted that at that time, there were a lot more trans women than there were trans men. And there's a couple of reasons that we discussed. One of them was obviously you have a lot more leeway as a woman to be viewed as a feminine, functional female adult in terms of meeting your gender stereotype, right? Being gender conforming for your local culture than men do. Men do not have as broad of a area of movement as women do. So if you're outside of the bounds of your normal your local cultural spectrum of gender conformity and you're male, it's more likely for you to be dysphoric because of it, in my opinion, because it's less socially accepted for you to fail to conform or to for you to choose not to conform. Now, people will point to people who are famous and rich who have not conformed and been accepted. But it's a lot easier to get people to accept your eccentricities if you're wealthy than it is if you're just, some guy living in the neighborhood. And that's an issue. Then the other thing is, we hear all the time and have heard for years and years about various incarnations of quote-unquote toxic masculinity. Male behavior is demonized. Men face stricter obligations, stricter boundaries, stricter requirements of behavior, expectations, stricter limitations on their behavior. Not the same thing as boundaries necessarily, and so on than women do. And so men are more likely to be condemned, men are more likely to be demonized, men are more likely to be criticized, men are more likely to be made fun of, looked down on, treated as acceptable targets for violence and ridicule and emotional abuse and so on. Right? Their society's attitude sinks, asshole sinks, right? Like a heat sink in a mech, but for society's asshole behavior. And so if you were in a situation where you wanted to escape that, the best way to escape it without dying would be to become a woman. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons why more men might be trans, and might be trans women than women become trans men. Why more men might experience dysphoria and so on. And why more young men might be convinced they're experiencing dysphoria when they're not. Now that's changed. There's been reasons why that's changed. But yeah, both internal and external misandry. And what really seems to shock a lot of trans women is rather than escaping that misandry, they discover that it's just transferred from being you suck because you're a man to you suck because you're trying to usurp female privilege. So that's one of the reasons I think a lot of trans women historically have committed suicide, because it didn't solve the problem. And I think in terms of the entire trans issue and the entire gender identity issue where people have started turning kinks into identities in calling it their sexuality and building pronouns around them and everything, if we just treated people like human beings and accepted people for who they are, as long as who they are doesn't involve violating boundaries between themselves and other people. Like, obviously, we don't accept people who commit sexual violence, and we don't accept people who exploit inability to consent, but we would accept the idea that you like to wear a dress instead of pants. Okay. You know, I don't care if you like to wear a freaking diaper, as long as I don't have to look at it on the street in a parade with my kids or my grandkids.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to change it. You find somebody that's into that and partner up and be happy together, and that's your business, not mine.
Right.
That's because I'm Gen X and we don't do that shit. No, the whole everybody has to know my kink and celebrate it with me. No, it's your business, not mine. I don't care, and I don't want anything to do with it, and I'm not going to condemn you for it. And you're not bad or wrong or, you know, whatever. That's fine. Just leave me out of it. It's not my kink.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's all I want in my life, right? And I think if we could do that as a society, which we had started to do before the first wave of wokeism in the 90s, we would be in a much better place in terms of our relationship between the genders and our relationship between various aspects of our culture. Just saying.
Agreed.
And I also don't think that there would be as many people having surgery to make their identity real if we just accepted people for who they were. Richard Beer gave us $5 and said, didn't Gandhi actually use the term economic violence during his campaign to liberate India from the British Empire? I think he did. I think you're right.
Yeah, Gandhi was not all he's cracked up to be.
No.
So many of these people who we think of as universal heroes were a lot of skeletons in their closet.
Yeah. He goes on to say, I read a science fiction short story whereby filing taxes had the notion that you would decide on every line how much of your tax dollars would go to each and every single government program. Yeah. You know, actually, if our government did that, we'd have to file, everybody would have to file electronically. Otherwise, you would be sending a 5,000-page document when you filed your taxes. But yeah, so in terms of calling things violence, right? If I went out and found a way to control your relationship to the local economy in such a way that you would starve to death, it would be fair to call that economic violence. If you can't go buy a new pair of shoes to go with your new outfit, but you're not going to be shoeless because of that, and you're upset about it, and you're distressed over it, feminists will call that economic violence if you're a woman, right? They won't if you're a man. And that's where I think the term is fake. Same thing with emotional violence. The chick that talked the boyfriend into getting back into the vehicle where he was gassing himself to death after he got scared and got out, engaged in emotional violence. She bullied him to death. She literally talked him into killing himself. Literally badgered him into killing himself when he was in a state of reduced cognitive capability because he was damaged from the fumes he'd already consumed. That I would call it fair. I'm not going to argue with somebody who calls that emotional violence. But for instance, God Evolves published pictures of me on Twitter where he darkened my teeth and made them look worse than they really were at the time. They're that bad now. And he called me meth teeth and all kinds of stuff. Like, he was obviously trying to embarrass me and make me feel bad and stuff. I don't consider that violence. it would be fair to call it bullying. I didn't really let him bully me over that. He was just talking about a fact of life that is not really... it's not like it's something I had control over. It's actually part of one of the mutations on the motherfucker gene. It's like, motherfucker, there go my teeth. But in any case, I suppose if somebody had more of their ego attached to how their teeth looked, then he might have succeeded in causing distress, which was his goal. That's bullying. It's abuse. But it's not violence. He didn't do physical damage to me. I didn't kill myself over it. I didn't even end up in medical treatment because of it. I was kind of laughing at him about it. So there's that. Richard Beer gave us another $5 and said, GoFundMe is the replacement for lie insurance and the hood. Yeah. Anonymous gave us $5 and said, appreciate the light you shined on the trans struggle, but the crux of my super chat was how fucked the nurse is. Oh yeah. She was happy to create a man, and the glee in her smile made my blood boil. That's a really unfortunately common attitude among women. Right? So there's the social understanding that in comparison to men, women are weak. Well, in comparison to men, women are less physically strong. Women are less prone to endurance, less likely to be fast moving. We have greater flexibility physically. We can stretch more. We're like rubber men. Our bones are more flexible. They're thinner too, and they.
Women are more psychologically strong. Dare I say, psychologically violent?
In a lot of ways, yeah. Although there are things that women don't handle that men do, too. Like we have different directions.
I mean, in the relationship between men and women, women can bring men to their knees just by thinking or just by saying something in a way that men simply cannot to women.
Yeah, there are ways that women have a lot of power, but women take this notion of men being bigger and stronger, and the feminist narrative of men being in control of society, which is utter bullshit, because most of what gets done in society is done for women's benefit, or women benefit from it on behalf of children, right? And yeah, we also have a thicker fat layer in our skin. But yeah, we could all adopt the idea that masculinity is something to resent if we were short-sighted enough to accept the feminist narrative. So when a woman does that, when a woman accepts that feminist narrative that men are something to resent and be angry about and feel oppressed by and done, hard done by, done wrong by, those women, anytime something bad happens to a man, anytime they get one over on a man or they see somebody getting one over on a man, they're going to celebrate that. It's, in a way, the silver lining in that dark cloud is that you know who those women are, because they do that. They do that thing. They hold up the genitalia with a gleeful grin. Look, I have a severed penis. They're gonna do that. Oh look, this guy got fired. I'll bet that brought him down. That kind of. Oh look, so and so is divorced. She's gonna take everything he has. Ha ha ha. Like that. That's the warning label that women will put on themselves. Don't trust me. I'm this kind of person. Yeah. So there you go. Scientists are claiming women are better than men with reflexes and remaining calm under pressure. Depends on the pressure. I've seen distinct differences in what types of pressure men and women handle. I would say there's a very different way of handling whiny, crying kids between men and women, and that's pressure. But if you point a gun at a man versus a woman, the man handles it better. Whereas with whiny kids, if it's a situation where the best route isn't necessarily to shut the kids up, like, quit your whining, this is the situation, like maybe the kid's sick, and it's just going to be that way for a couple of days, that the kid is going to be whiny because you're dealing with somebody who's 2 years old, has a fever, a sick tummy, and a stuffy nose, and doesn't understand. It gets on the man's nerves more than the woman. But unless you're dealing with a woman who doesn't have the capacity to tune things out and be sympathetic, like then you get Lois responding to Stewie, what?
Not only do women have a certain power over men, but they know it.
Yeah.
You may have seen a lot of physical fights between men. There's kinds of videos of this now that everyone has a camera. And whenever there's this kind of fight, you very often see a woman coming between the men and going right up into one of the men's faces and saying, "Stop!" And she knows she gets away with it because the man just backs off.
Yeah.
Because he's not going to hit a woman, and the woman knows.
Oh yeah.
He's not going to hit her. Women know this instinctively. They'll pretend they don't. They'll feign all of this fear over what a man can do to her. But when the rubber meets the road, they know they can get right up in a man's face and he'll do nothing to her.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I mean by this psychological strength between men and women.
Yeah, and there's different directions of how that's handled and everything. Like, if you take a man and a woman and you put them in an environment where it's cold enough to be profoundly uncomfortable, but not cold enough to be dangerous, the woman will complain. I'm cold, and even if there's no chance at fixing the problem for like the next hour, you're gonna be cold. You have to get this shit done before you can fix the problem, or you're gonna be in this environment for an hour and there's nothing you can do about it. You'll see most men will hunker down. Okay, gonna be cold for an hour. That sucks. And then it'll be done. And if there's a thing that needs to get done, maybe I can get out of it faster if I do this quickly and efficiently. Whereas it'll affect the woman's performance. She will whine about it. She will ask someone to remedy it, even if there is no remedy available. And she'll say it's unfair. She'll call it misogynistic. She'll assume that men in the room aren't suffering it as much as she is, and so on. But, so that's pressure that women don't function. And it's, again, there's always exceptions, right? But that's pressure that women don't handle as well as men. Then you turn around and you expose a guy to a woman he knows starts fights and creates conflict and is a drama queen, and she asks him, "Do these pants make my ass look fat?" And he doesn't have a clever answer prepared. All of a sudden you discover a whole different level of not being able to handle pressure, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe he doesn't have a Twix bar handy. You're going to find a guy stammering and stuttering and trying to get out of the conversation and, whatever it takes to protect himself from the onslaught of stormy behavior that he's going to get if he says the wrong thing, knowing that everything is the wrong thing, and he doesn't know what the right thing is.
Right. It's how do you battle out of this?
Yeah. And it's not necessarily superior of women to be able to inflict that, but it is an area where pressure can be as tough on men as on women. So, but anyway, yeah, Richard Beer gave us $10 and said emasculation and making eunuchs is the equivalent of porn for those kind of women. Yes, exactly. They get off on it. They get excited about it. They celebrate it. They treat it like it's a victory. And that's how they tell you at the top of their voice, don't trust me. This is the kind of person that I am. So, I don't know. Let's see if we have anything. I didn't look yet at Brave. Or at Brave. I keep saying Brave because that's the browser I'm using. But at Rumble. So I'm going to double check here and make sure. Do we have any? Yes, we do. The Fish Got Nukes gave us $10 and said kink monies. Yeah. Also, he said before that he recently learned that the lemmings instantly attack anything, no matter how big, but badgers rip off heads. Yes, we do. So there's that. With that, I think
heads, we bite the balls off of lions.
That's right, and liars. I think that's what we did tonight. Bit the balls off of a liar. Hopefully not, though. But like, he can keep his balls. He can keep his lies too. We just want to nip the social control that those lies provide in the bud. Let's see. Albert Nader Retro says Tate does all the stuff this channel has condemned women for doing. Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that. It's coercive control, not cohesive control. Sex as a weapon, physical, emotional, sexual abuse. I don't think he's a big hero here. I'm trying to figure out why you think he's a hero. But
he's got a bug up his ass. That's why. I mean, listen. I don't recall any of these people actually proclaiming to be men's rights activists. Forgive me if I'm wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, no, he seems to be like one of those, he's not exactly a pickup artist, but the guy that tells other guys how to guy correctly, in his opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like, if guys listen to him, they're going to listen to him. If they don't, they don't. I think he's got some ideas that are dead wrong. Just absolutely dead wrong. I don't know how abusive people keep saying he's been abusive to women. I haven't seen that. I've seen him taking advantage of guys' insecurities. Yeah, life coach, Boda, that's about as close as you can get. Maybe he thinks he's a masculinity coach. But
I don't know or care what he thinks or describes himself as, but people seem to forget that if you don't give these people attention, then they don't have control over your life. There's a world. There are people in this world who have never heard of Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, they know nothing about this. And so just these are just random fucking people, fresh and fit. I couldn't even tell you who those dudes are. Never watched a show. Don't care. I've never watched one of Pearl's show. I've never watched any of their shows. Don't even know who Justin Waller is.
I don't either.
Don't care. Again, they hold no water here because that's not what we do here. And if that's what you think we do here, then I think you're on the wrong channel.
Yeah. I will say I do see the influence of the men's rights movement on Pearl. I think she has been influenced by, not necessarily this channel, but as a movement. She's been influenced by us as a movement. She has talked to MRAs and learned things from MRAs. Yep. I don't see the influence of the men's rights movement on Tate. and I don't think she's the female Tate. I
No.
find it interesting that she looked at women's habits and concluded that women shouldn't vote. I think that was actually quite rational. And, I mean, it's the same conclusion Karen came to.
Yeah.
But, no, I don't view any of these people as deities or
Right.
as anything more important or bigger or better or anything than any of the other people that I've run into in the manosphere. It's just they're people in the manosphere. They've got ideas and thoughts and beliefs and stuff, and that's fine. Don't make them larger than they are. Don't make them larger than life.
If you like us so much and you don't like Knucklehead number 70, then rather than coming to our channel and talking about Knucklehead number 70, how about you go to the channel of Knucklehead number 70 and talk about us?
Yeah.
Have you considered that? Because that would get us on the radar rather than them. Is that not a better way to go about all this?
Yeah. And as far as Pearl's success, I don't resent that either. She started out on a different platform than we did, and it wasn't censored the way ours. So, for instance, we started out on YouTube. Well, we started out on Blog Talk, and then we went to YouTube, and immediately YouTube began censoring us. I don't think what's it called, censored her until she got big and scary to them. By that time, it was too late. She already had a following.
Mm-hmm.
I actually kind of think, I was wrong to not put effort into getting a device I could use for that platform. God, why can't I think of this stupid Chinese platform? It's not YouTube. But
TikTok?
TikTok.
TikTok.
Well
so
done for forgetting. That's what I'm talking about.
She made it right on TikTok. Like, for some stupid reason, I couldn't think of the term TikTok. But anyway, I know why. It's because I'm sleep deprived. But I don't resent that. I just wish that I'd found a way to get us the same benefit. And I missed the boat on that. So, as far as that goes, like, you don't resent somebody else's success. You learn from it. So if another platform comes along and my hang up about getting on it is, that same issue of spying and stealing and stuff, fine. I'll get a freaking burner phone or an old device like a Chromebook or something and create a whole different profile and have it not be associated with any of my other devices, and that'll solve the problem. But that's it. And it's like I said, nobody's saying that you guys aren't doing everything that you should be doing. It's just we're not here to be angry at and condemn people for being more famous than we are, or for having different opinions on how to approach the way that men are mistreated and feminism handicaps women. Because feminism does handicap women. And it's just men, we make sure people understand that we're still saying men are the primary victims of feminism, because we don't want our channel to become all about women. Right? We're not trad cons, we're not conservatives, we're not anti-trad cons or anti-conservatives, we're not communists, we're not anti-communists. Well, I am, but I can't say we're not anti-government either, because I am. But in terms of we're not a faction, a facet of the political spectrum. We're about the issues themselves, and we're not here to boot people out of public discussion of these issues and what their ideas are. We're here to talk about the ideas themselves and say, well, the problem is you're looking at it from this angle, but this angle has a different gives you different results, or have you considered this evidence, or that approach was tried during this time period by these people with this initiative, and here's what the results were, and that's why we're not doing it now, and that kind of thing. That's how you hash out ideas, not purity testing and setting people on pedestals and shit. Like, don't ever put me on a pedestal. I don't have the balance I used to when I was a kid. I'll fall. Richard Beer gave us another $5 and said, "It's not the pants that make your ass look fat." You should have seen me 6 or 7 months ago. It was definitely not the pants that made my ass look fat. So I am down 35 pounds. And
very nice. Good job.
I'm excited. I'm not going to die of a heart attack next week. But yeah, I there's lots of clever comebacks guys can make, and there's two different groups of men in terms of that, just like there's two different groups of women in terms of handling. I'll handle being cold, and I'll perform when I have to in uncomfortable conditions. I'll perform work tasks and so on because I've developed that capability, but it doesn't come naturally to me. And men have to develop that smartassery when it comes to it. Doesn't come naturally to most men to smart off to women in a way that the woman might view as mistreating her. That's not. I don't think it comes naturally to men to treat people that way necessarily. I think women, we're born with a bitch gene, so yeah. Oh.
Yes.
And Albert Nader Retro gave us $5 more and said, "Eric July, Daisy Cousins, Legion of Myth, and almost Dean Cain via Eric July interview with Cain. Congrats on the weight loss, Hannah, and thank you for all of that." And then he also gave us $5 earlier and said, "I promote the Badgers all the time. How do you think Brian got Eric July for an interview?"
Thank you.
And that's
Thank
awesome.
you for that. Albert.
Thank you for that.
That's the half of the equation that's good.
Yep,
the other half of the equation, right, is shut the fuck up about Andrew Tate.
Well, I mean, half of his fame is from feminists complaining about him.
Well, and listen, as someone who spent got a couple of decades under my belt in customer service, you learn that people who leave the reviews the most are the unsatisfied customers. They're not the happy customers. Happy customers go away. The unsatisfied customers, they leave bad reviews. They go and tell all their friends, because people love to complain.
Yeah.
Misery loves company. It's just, I don't know. It's a part of the human condition, shall we say. And I think there's a tinge of that going on here. But, of course, when you're upset, you want people to know about it. And, to that end, I understand. But at some point, you got to give it a rest. We're sitting here telling you as if you haven't gotten the message many times before about how we feel about this subject. But, I for one, am not going to entertain it anymore.
Yeah. I guess my way of handling it is, when I see somebody saying, man up and just ask women out, my answer is going to be, which ones? You point out which women that this guy can absolutely 100% trust are never going to make false allegations. And when they do that, I guarantee you I can find an example of one who did.
Right.
So there you go. Let's see. Albert Nader Retro gave us $2 more Canadian and said, "Happy to help, Doc." Thumbs up the Tate thing. Thumbs up the Tate thing.
You did it again.
Shrug.
Don't even mention his name.
Yeah. Actually, that's my position on him is his fame comes from pissing people off. So if you're pissed off, he wins.
Yeah, the subconscious mind doesn't understand negatives. If you tell yourself not to do something, your subconscious will just hear, do the thing.
Which is just like day before
No
yesterday.
news is good news.
I got into a big Twitter smackdown, like cage match with a whole bunch of other people on Twitter because of making a statement that was deliberately provocative. So that you get more attention. People always say you draw more flies with honey than with vinegar, and they're wrong. You draw more flies with shit.
Yep.
So there you go. But with that, I'm going to call it. Boda. Boda, you are a dork. Just saying. That's a compliment. But yeah. With all that, thanks everybody for listening. That's all of our super chats. That's all of our super chows. That's all of our whatever we call the paid chats from Rumble. All of our Rumble tumbles. I don't know. And thanks to everybody. Thanks to everybody who listened to the. This is kind of a weird sausage, kind of a toxic sausage. Thanks to my two co-hosts who stuck out the switching back and forth between this and that bits of information and talking about floods bullshit. And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. Good night, all.
Good night, y'all.